So now we'll turn our attention to immigration. There's a lot to talk about with immigration, but we want to think about the economic costs and benefits as well as some of the other things. In this video, we'll look at your prepositions, the economic benefits and costs, and look at some labor supply and demand graphs, and a few other economic arguments, and then a little bit on the data about crime. As for the ethics and morals of immigration, those are big and important questions, but Brian Kaplan in his book Open Borders that we're reading covers them very well, so I'm going to let him do the heavy lifting on that part. We'll focus just on the economics. All right, in lieu of discussions, which would happen face-to-face, discuss with yourself or maybe with somebody else what your preconceptions are. Where do you come into this topic believing? Do you believe that the U.S. should increase its immigration? Yes, no, or not sure? By the way, that not sure should be something that more of us consider answering more of the time in general. It's not an American position, but it's a humble and useful position as we come into complex topics. Another question, do you believe that the benefits outweigh the costs of immigration, generally speaking? Complex topic that a lot of people have very, very strong opinions about. And as a reminder, you are not required to hew to any particular opinion, but you are required to consider the different arguments at a collegiate level. Now, getting into some popular mythology around immigration, do you believe that all immigrants could enter the U.S. legally if they wanted to? The get in line argument. And if you'd like some data on how long it actually takes and what the pathways, so to speak, are, or used to be anyway, the Cato Institute, which is a libertarian think tank, has got a nice chart that shows from different countries how long the wait times have been, but in truth, nobody really knows. I'll let you read through this if you like. But if you're like TLDR, the upshot is it's pretty difficult to immigrate to the U.S. And we immigrate fewer people in proportion to the size of our population than most other countries. So this is getting attention. Would you favor merit-based immigration that rewards more highly skilled immigrants? Usually, if you haven't given it too much thought, you're more likely to say yes to this and no to the low-skilled immigrants. And that's why the U.S. and most other countries have already in place merit-based immigration. That, of course, has ethical and moral considerations that I'll let you chew on if you like. But allow me to cut to the chase from the Economist point of view. There are more benefits than costs for both high-skilled and low-skilled immigrants, is the mainstream economic position. So let's ease ourselves into the economics. Do you believe that, with current patterns, that immigrants reduce the wages of lower-skilled, higher-skilled, both, or neither of our native workers? Think about that for a minute. All right, wouldn't it be nice to have some data? Guess what? We do. One more question before we get into the graphs and the theory. Whose benefits and costs should we consider? Should we consider the benefits and costs just of U.S. citizens? Or is it right to consider the costs and benefits also to those that would be immigrants? And related, is migration a basic human right? Within countries? Between countries? Would it be right for the U.S. government to limit your migration to within a county or a state? See what I mean about the so many good complex questions coming out of this stuff? Yes. So let's predict the Econ 101 take on immigration. The argument that immigrants' lower wages can be traced to this argument. So we've got a downward sloping demand for labor. We've got the price of labor, which is the wage. We've got the quantity of labor. The assumption, and these are key, is that there's one labor market and that native workers are homogeneous to immigrant workers in skill. Before we draw the supply curve, let's think about What is a prediction? Other things equal, or in economics, the Latin is ceteris paribus. Nothing else changes. If there's an increase in supply of something, doesn't the price drop? So, increase in supply, drop the wage. And if we draw a traditional upward sloping supply curve for labor, the wage rate for natives and the employment rate for natives should be like this. So, this is without immigration. How should we show the addition of immigrants? Well, could we say that there's an increase in supply of workers? Nothing else changes the demand, right? The demand for the workers, which is derived from the demand for the products that the workers make, those aren't necessarily going to be changing, right? People still want just as many widgets as before. But with an increase in supply, there's more quantity of labor supplied at every price of labor or wage. And so the supply curve, when you add immigrants and natives, shifts to the right. And you will get the resulting reduction in wage but more jobs, or more people being hired. And so we're done, right? End of story? Not so fast. This seems legit. This logic is sound. Let's check it with the data. So we have this beautiful natural experiment. In 1980, up to 125,000 Cubans, somewhere between 80,000 to 125,000, were allowed to mass migrate. Both Fidel Castro and Jimmy Carter, president of the US, agreed to this. So within about 4 months, Miami's population rose about 7%. Would you predict the effect on wages in the Miami area? Especially for low-skilled workers? If you predicted they would fall, you would be justified in the model, but you would be wrong. Let's take a closer look at this. Okay, so the actual data looks something like this. You've got wage in log form, which is just a way to make more sense. And over time, wages were dropping to low-skilled wage earners, high school or less. And in the years where, or in 1980, when this Mariel Boatlift happened, actually no difference in the trend. There's been some debate about this. George Borjas, an immigration skeptic, has pointed out that, well, if you slice and dice the data in a certain way, you can get white males that are this old with less than high school to actually show a slightly bigger drop in wages because of the Mariel Boatlift, apparently. But this means that you're cutting it down to a very small sample size. And actually, some people have taken down his argument by saying he actually looked at a different set of data over that time period. So again, we rely on these very infrequent natural experiments, but it looks as if no matter which group you're looking at, there's not any proof that this very large increase in immigrants into a fixed population did a whole lot to decrease native workers' wages. So, what gives? Well, let's take a look at the graphs. If you draw the supply of native workers, a demand for labor, and you are focused just on the market for low-skilled workers, then it's clear that you're going to have this. Before this immigration happened, you're going to have this wage and this quantity of labor. And as soon as these new workers arrive, clearly it's an increase, right, in the number of workers. This part is not wrong, but it's not the end of the story. We'll call this point 1. We'll call this point 2, and it's not the end of the story. It's the halfway point. So what else? Can you think of what else might happen to pull the wages back up? I'll wait. All right, your thinking time is over. What do those new workers do with their wages? Hint, it is not burn the money nor stick it under their mattress, but it's spend it. So when you generate new demand for goods, you generate new demand for new workers. Is it possible that you get a new demand and your wage is basically unchanged? So maybe this was your first wage, your second wage, but at the end of the day, after the workers have come, worked, and spent their money and generated revenue at existing firms, maybe even started some new firms and generated revenue at those new firms, you've got this situation where there's more jobs around, so there's not a ton of unemployment, and you've got wages unchanged. It's forgetting about the demand side. That's what gets us into this silly argument that immigration can only hurt wages. We forget about what the workers do with those wages, the demand side. In the year 2017, we have 1,470 economists, including economists from both sides of the political spectrum, Nobel Prize winners, multiple Nobel Prize winners, and this is the letter that was sent to Congress, knowing that we have a new regime and a new administration that was markedly and determinedly anti-immigration. They said, please do not stop immigration. Immigration brings entrepreneurs. Immigration brings young workers, and America is aging. So this is an important thing for our social safety net. We need taxpayers to come in and keep funding the revenues that are used to pay for Social Security and other safety net programs. Immigration also increases diversity, and in capitalism, you need increased specialization to keep increasing your productivity, right? And also, if those people happen to bring entrepreneurial ideas with them, then you're going to create some new technologies along the way too. So more diversity, more flexibility, productivity rises. They are more likely to be innovative in job-creating fields, at least they have been historically, and that drives economic growth. So I would say the mainstream economic point of view is pretty much pro-immigration. Now, there's a lot people are all over on the spectrum about what type of immigration, how fast to do it, etc. You see some of those arguments in open borders. Some of the hottest button debates are in low-skilled immigrants. So here's the idea. It's a lot easier to make the case for high-skilled immigrants, right? They clearly generate a lot more of the high-skilled sort of productivity that we want. However, for high-skilled workers, they're also more likely to compete with high-skilled workers. So keep that in mind. But unskilled immigration or low-skilled immigration presents a unique set of benefits, and that is that they are most different from a pretty high-skilled American workforce. And so they become complements to the workers. Think of an immigrant from an unskilled immigrant from another country that works as a nanny to a high-skilled couple on the Upper West Side in Manhattan. The couple now is more likely to be able to specialize in doing what they're good at and leave the childcare to the nanny, right? So complementary workforce when we think about people taking care of landscapes or house cleaning and on and on and on, right? The more specialized we are, the more we need people at all different levels. And the more that diversity brings with it economic benefit. A quick word about being a drain on resources. This current administration has talked about this quite a bit. The reality is that unauthorized workers receive very few public services and usually contribute to the tax base and pay Social Security without ever collecting benefits, so they're free tax revenue. And for some of us that have maybe seen this meme quite a bit about immigrants being more likely to commit violent crime, either through terrorism or through being rapists from Mexico. Very dangerous memes that are going around, and also just very untrue. Take 10 seconds, look at the data. It's nowhere in the data. There's a great sort of set of studies that look at this. So I've shown you the link down here. Feel free to visit that. So most Americans believe that immigrants make crime worse, but they're buying into some political narrative that's, of course, useful to politicians, but just untrue. The reality is different. You can see the correlation between immigrant population and violent crime rate is, if anything, in the last couple decades, a negative one. And here's the source data, and there's more. New York Times did a nice interactive here. If you'd like to take a look, see that link on the prior page, and this is the actual data here. More immigrants, less crime. And this is over 100 metropolitan areas. A weird thing, as reported by The Economist in the Pew Research Center, is that first-generation immigrants are much less likely than native-born people at the same age to commit crime. In the second generation, it must be that Americans are having a bad influence on them, because they tend to mirror American-born population crime rates a little bit more closely. All right, quick check. Did you understand the findings of the Mariel Boatlift? And The Economist is David Card. There is no effective immigration in wage or employment trends in Miami. B, immigration spurred economic growth by creating small businesses. C, wages dropped as a result of increased numbers of low-skilled immigrants. Or D, increased immigrants created a boom in housing demand, raising prices. What do you think? The answer is A. In fact, large meta-studies have found that over the long term government budget, the fiscal impacts of immigrants are generally positive at the federal level and negative slightly at the state and local level, for a grand total of slightly positive to the economy. You may be wondering why positive at federal and negative at state. Well, so is my dog. It is that it's education, right? States pay for education, and so and in the U.S., education is very expensive despite our fairly low test scores. And we have this thing of it's really an investment in immigrant kids, and that investment pays off. They become much more contributory to the fiscal reality of the U.S., more productive, less likely to need assistance, etc. But this is not to gloss over the losses. There are losses, and there are losses felt very keenly by certain groups. In this case, it looks as if a consensus report shows that wages are reduced for native high school dropouts. Those are the people to whom immigration in its current patterns costs the most. Overall, for the economy, more benefits than costs, but for these particular groups, it may be reversed. And so what's the correct policy? Is it to stop all immigration to help these people out? Or is it to allow immigration and then do something else? With the benefits of immigration, with the benefits to the economy, the economic growth that generates revenue and monies, maybe we could help these people retrain or give incentives for going back to school or whatever. Generally speaking, economists don't like to stop capitalism and stop free trade, and notice that immigration is pro-capitalist, right? Immigration fits in with the capitalist mantra of allowing free movement of resources, all resources, including labor, to their best uses. When we have globalization without free movement of people, which is what we have now, free movement of capital, free movement of money, free movement of almost everything but people, you set up a very strange form of globalization that has huge benefits for the people in the developed world and huge costs for everybody else. But capitalism requires, and economic growth benefits from the free movement of resources, including people. So it follows that economists are generally not inclined to want to stop capitalism. They want to expand the benefits of markets, and then it's not wrong to help certain groups out that are hurt by globalization and hurt by capitalism, but don't shut down the benefit. It's like killing the goose that lays the golden egg. So it is with immigration that economists, even like George Borjas, who I mentioned earlier, that are immigration skeptics, they agree that there's a positive spillover from immigration. Some data you may be interested in. Where are most of the immigrants in the U.S.? Why, they happen to be in the places that are most open politically to immigration. And if you thought that Mariel Boatlift wasn't a large enough natural experiment, here's another one. In the 1960s, the U.S. decided to eliminate Mexican guest workers, braceros, from America's agricultural labor force, and it had no real impact. So here's the years where they were removed, and wages did not appreciably change. Although it did hasten the move to mechanization, which is the same thing we're seeing now because of the decline in immigrant farm labor in California. And a little more on that merit-based immigration idea. So if you agree that high-skilled immigrants bring more entrepreneurial zest and productivity to the U.S., at least in the short run, let's require them to be even more high-skilled upon entry. This is like the H-1B visa program. But the truth of the matter is that they're already more highly skilled than natives, and have been for quite a while. And if you happen to subscribe to the view that we should count not only natives' costs and benefits, but also immigrants' benefits, let's think about this. Indian computer programmers who come to the U.S. on H-1B guest worker visas see their earnings increase by factors of 5 or 6. Some research suggests tenfold or more by moving from poor countries to rich countries. That is an amazing amount of benefit. And that's resources moving to their best, most productive, most lucrative uses. That's the free market at work. Now, stroke your beard for a minute and consider this. If we are hyper-focused on increasing our exports as a way to help our economy, what if we export to people inside? See what I mean? Bringing the customers to our shores makes them easier to reach and massively increases their incomes, massively increasing their ability to buy things. All right, and another thing about that U.S. demography issue, we're aging. Some of us are aging rapidly. Demographers forecast that immigration, both the people it provides directly and the children that immigrants bear and raise, are the only reason America's working age population isn't declining. Doubly true, immigrants' work in the household and childcare sectors likely serves to increase native-born Americans' childbearing as well. There's that complementary factor again. One more question for you. Your opinion. What is your thinking about this? What is the effect of immigration restrictions on free markets? Do you think A, it strengthens them by keeping free riders from draining benefits? That get them off the welfare dole argument. B, it weakens them by preventing the free flow of resources. C, it makes our country safer, which benefits markets. A and B, or none of the above, or other. I'll leave that to you. I would say that economists are probably going to be answering mostly B. Last slide, I won't talk about this because it's a little hard to see, but you can zoom in and see sort of a brief history of immigration in the U.S. We have gone through so many changes in immigration policies, and it's always been a huge fight.